This video will be on decreasing. Decreasing can be used for a variety of different things. It could be decreasing of a sleeve. It could be the shaping of a neckline. It could be making the cap on a sleeve where you decrease both sides and curve it around. So there's a lot of different uses for decreasing. Here's the two patterns that we're going to go through today. You cast on 14 STS, stands for stitches. Work 6 rows of garter, which is knit every row. Then row 1 through 4, work in, here's a new abbreviation, STST stands for stockinette stitch, which is knit a row, purl a row. Then row 7 is decrease, 1 ST for stitch, each and every other row, which means every knit side, because row 8 is a purl across row. Then you repeat rows 7 and 8 4 times. So that way you go back up and do this 3 more times. So you have a total of 8 decreases. So let's do that one real quick. We have that one here. Okay, I've got the beginning where we got the cast on 14 stitches. Work 6, I have 6 rows of garter, but I think I've only got 4 here. Then 1 through 4 stockinette stitch, which is right here, which is a knit a row, purl a row. And now we're going to start the decrease 1 stitch each and every other row. So that would be decrease here and here. There's 2 ways to decrease. You can do like I like to do, where you knit a stitch and then do your decrease. So that way you have an extra edge here, so when you get ready to do your seam, you've got a nice little edge to seam. Or you can actually decrease right on the edge itself. You can see right here where the knit 2 togethers are. And then you got the one on this side. So let's go with that real quick. We can grab myself a needle. So you have 2 options. You can either, now I like to do the SSK, but I like to cheat. Instead of doing an SSK, I like to knit 2 together through the back loop. So you go through the back loop of the 2nd and 3rd stitch, yarn over and pull it through. And that causes it to go to lean to the left. Otherwise, if you do the regular knit 2 together through the front loop, it leans to the right. We want the one that leans to the left. And the one that leans to the left never lays as nice as the one that leans to the right, or at least I've never been able to find one that does that well. Let me go over to the end because we already know how to knit. Let's get to the other end real quick. Okay, now we're going to knit 2 together through the front loops this time. And then we knit our last stitch. So now if you look here, this one leans this way, where this one, as you can see, is leaning this way. Then, as it says in row 8, we're going to purl across or purl back, whichever way you want to say it. So this is where the yarn is in front. You yarn over in front and go back through. So you go back from back to front instead of from front to back. These stitches should be getting pretty easy for you to do. You should not have any major complications or problems with them. Let me do one more row of this type of decrease where you knit 1 and then decrease. And then we'll do the other type where you actually decrease right on the end. Both ways are perfectly acceptable, whichever way you prefer. Okay, so I like to knit 1. Knit 2 together through the back loop, sort of lean to the left. See? And then we're going to knit to the last 3 stitches. Now this one we're going to knit 2 together through the front loops. That's why you kind of get up on the tip of the needle. That gives you that little extra bit of room you need to get the other tip through. If you were back on the thick part of the needle, it'd be extremely difficult to get that 2nd needle through those 2 stitches. Now let me purl back real quick. And then I'll show you the one where you would knit 2 together on the actual end stitches, which is acceptable. It's whichever one you are the most comfortable with. Everybody finds their favorite way of doing something. As long as the finished product looks like it's supposed to, you've done it right. Okay, let's try the other way now. The other way is you knit 2 together with the first 2 stitches. Now if you notice I didn't go through the back loops. You can go through the back loops if you want. That'll turn the stitches that direction to the left. When you get to the other end, you knit 2 together through the front. That will cause them to lean to the right. I'm just about there. So now you knit the last 2 stitches together. So that makes them lean the directions you need them to lean. Let's go ahead and do one more real quick so you can hopefully be able to see it a little better. Okay, here we go. Whoops. Hands are a little slippery tonight. Okay, you can either knit 2 together through the front loops, or you can knit 2 together on this side through the back loops. It's entirely up to you. I didn't catch it very good. Let me try again. There, it came through. And we'll get to the other end. And on this end, we knit 2 together through the back loops. The front loops. So as you see, your work keeps angling in. You either have the edge to stitch right here to sew through, or you sew right through where you've got your decreases. Here you've got that edge, or right on the edge. So it's entirely up to you which way you want to do it. Okay, now the next one is what we do for either a sleeve cap or a neckline. The way that one looks is like this. We start with cast on 14. So it did it here too. Should be stitches. Work 4 rows of garter, which is knit every row. Rows 1 through 6 work in stockinette stitch, which I did in parentheses here, which is knit a row, purl a row, which we've gone over. Then you'll see something like this. It will either say armhole shaping, neck shaping, cap of sleeve shaping, and then you would do what's underneath. They don't always have row numbers when they do a shaping thing because they're telling you in blocks of what to do. Like here, we'll start with bind off 4, did it again, bind off 4 stitches at neck edge. So you have to decide which is the neck edge of your piece. In this case, we're going to say this is the neck edge, so you'd bind off 4 stitches here. Now, if the neck edge is on this side, you can't bind off going this direction. You have to actually work from the purl side, and you'd bind off 4 stitches on the purl side instead of binding off 4 stitches on the knit side. But as you work on things, it'll get a little easier for you. Okay, here we are. We're ready to start the bind off. So binding off is another way of decreasing. It just depends on how the pattern is written as to what stitches you do. So let's start with our bind off. You need to knit 2 stitches. Put the first over the second. That's 1. Do it again. 2, 3, 4. So then we got our 4 bind off stitches. Then you would just knit to the edge or knit to the end. A lot of times it'll tell you bind off 4 stitches and knit to the end, or it'll say bind off 4 stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. In this case, that would be your bind off for row 1. When you turn your work around, you would bind off on this side. This would be your bind off for the row 2 or the second one, but I'm not going to do that because this is just the neck edge only, so we're not going to do the bind off. Let's put these back on the needle. So if you were doing bind off the beginning of the next 2 rows, like I said, you do bind off here on the knit side and turn to the purl side and bind off 4 on the purl side, and that would give you the bind off on either side for your say cap of a sleeve or the sleeve and a neck. It just depends on what your pattern says. But right now we're going to purl across where it says here purl across all even rows, which in this case The even rows are like row 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and that would be your purl side, because all your odd rows, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, are all your knit rows. Okay, so now we go to the next thing, where it says decrease 1 stitch, knit edge every other knit row 3 times. So see, now it doesn't say anything about the purling, because up here it's telling you to purl across all the even rows. Then you decrease 1 stitch at the neck edge. Then you'd purl again, and you do this for the 3 times. So let's go ahead. Now we got 2 ways to do it. We can knit 1, knit 2 together, and then knit across. Likes to curl sometimes. And then we purl as the instructions say to do. Okay, so that was our first decrease one. So now we go back and follow this again, where you decrease 1 stitch on the neck edge. So we'll do it again. So this time we'll do it the other way. We will knit 2 together first and not do the actual knit 1 before we do it. Both ways are perfectly acceptable. Both ways work just fine. And when you're on the other side of your work, say you had to do a decrease on the other side of the work, you would do it the same way. You'd purl 2 stitches together, and you would continue purling across. And if we had to do it again on this side, we would knit 2 together through the back loop, or knit 2 together through the front loop, whichever way you want to do it, depending on which way you want it to look. Here you could actually knit 2 together on the front side. You just can't bind off, because bind off always has to come from the edge in, and there's no way to bind off when you're on this side to bind off on this end. So you have to, on the right side, bind off on the knit, on the left side, bind off on the purl. That ends this lesson.